Aston Martin didn't just struggle in China, they might be falling apart. Because this isn't about being slow. This is about a Formula One car that physically can't run properly. An engine that is shaking itself to pieces. A system so unstable, it's damaging components every time it hits the track. And here's the part that shocked the paddock. Drivers are actually feeling it. Pain, numbness, loss of control. That should never happen at this level. And now, the FIA is involved. Not to check performance, but to investigate what's going wrong inside that Honda engine. Because if this is what it looks like after just 2 races, this isn't a setback. This is a full-blown crisis. Stay here, because the detail that explains why this is happening changes everything. And once you hear it, you'll understand why Aston Martin might be in serious trouble this season. Subscribe now. Right after the Chinese Grand Prix, the concern inside Aston Martin wasn't about points. It was about survival. Because what they experienced during that weekend went far beyond a normal performance issue. From the outside, it still looked like a competitive Formula One car. Sharp design. Aggressive concept. Everything you would expect from a team pushing forward. But the moment the car hit the track, something was clearly wrong. Not subtle. Not occasional. Constant. And it started with a feeling the drivers couldn't ignore. Vibration. At first, it seemed manageable. Just another characteristic to deal with. But lap after lap, it got worse. Stronger. More aggressive. Transmitting through the entire car. Through the steering wheel. Through the seat. Through the pedals. And that's when it stopped being a performance issue and became a physical one. Because the drivers weren't just managing the car. They were enduring it. Numbness in their hands. Loss of feeling. A constant strain in their arms and back. And this wasn't after a full race distance. This was happening early. Much earlier than it should. Now think about that. A Formula One driver, unable to comfortably complete laps because of what the car is doing to their body. That changes everything. Because now, pushing the car becomes a risk. Not just to the result, but to the driver. And that forces the team into a corner. They can't run at full power. They can't use aggressive settings. They can't extract the performance the car might actually have. Because the moment they push, the problem gets worse. Now here's where the technical side becomes critical. Because these vibrations aren't random. They're coming from the power unit, the Honda engine. And more specifically, from how that engine interacts with the rest of the car. The structure, the battery, the mounting points. Everything is being affected. And the battery system is taking the biggest hit. Repeated damage. Components failing. Energy systems becoming unreliable. And every time that happens, the car has to stop. Immediately. No risk. No continuation. Just shut it down. And that leads to the biggest hidden problem of all. Lack of data. Because every time the car stops early, they lose information. They lose understanding. They lose the ability to improve. And in Formula One, that's devastating. Because development depends on data. Without it, you're guessing. And right now, Aston Martin is guessing. While every other team is learning. Improving. Moving forward. Now compare that to what we saw from the front of the grid. Teams running full programs. Collecting data. Refining setups. Building confidence. And Aston, trying to keep the car alive. That's not just a performance gap. That's a structural disadvantage. And it's growing with every session. But here's the most important detail. This isn't happening because the car concept is wrong. In fact, internally, there's belief in the chassis. Belief that the car, without these issues, could be competitive. Maybe not dominant. But certainly not at the back. The real problem is that they can't access that performance. Because the engine is controlling everything. Limiting everything. And until that changes, nothing else matters. Now add one more layer. Pressure. Because this is happening at the very start of a new regulation cycle. A moment where teams need momentum. Need confidence. Need direction. And Aston Martin has none of that. Instead, they have uncertainty. Questions. And a problem they don't fully understand yet. And that's where things start to become dangerous. Because when you don't understand the problem, you can't fix it. And when you can't fix it, it gets worse. Race after race. And that's exactly what they're facing right now. A situation that isn't stabilizing. It's escalating. And the most worrying part is that the root cause is still not fully clear. And this is where the situation becomes even more serious. Because once Aston Martin started digging deeper, they realized this isn't just one problem. It's a chain reaction. Everything leads back to one source, and then spreads across the entire car. The power unit. But not just the engine itself. How it's behaving. How it's vibrating. and how those vibrations are interacting with everything around it. Because in Formula One, the engine isn't isolated. It's part of the structure, bolted directly into the chassis, connected to the battery, integrated with the entire car. So when something like this happens, it doesn't stay contained. It spreads. And that's exactly what Aston Martin is dealing with. The vibrations coming from the Honda power unit aren't just strong. They're resonating, amplifying through the structure of the car, hitting components that were never designed to handle that level of stress. And the worst part is that it doesn't happen all the time. It appears in specific conditions, specific rev ranges, specific load phases, which makes it even harder to isolate. Because now you're not just fixing a constant issue. You're chasing something that appears and disappears. And every time it appears, it causes damage. Now imagine trying to solve that during a race weekend. Limited time, limited components, constant pressure, and every test run carries risk. Because if the vibration hits again, you lose another part, another battery, another opportunity to understand the problem. And that's exactly what's been happening. Parts failing faster than expected, components running out, the team forced to stop early, again and again. And this creates a situation that is almost impossible to manage. Because normally, when a team has a problem, they test solutions, compare data, move step by step toward a fix. But Aston Martin can't do that. They don't have enough stable running to compare anything. Every session is interrupted, every run incomplete. So instead of moving forward, they're stuck, trying different ideas, without knowing which one actually works. And that's why this is escalating so quickly. Because while they're searching for answers, the rest of the grid is moving ahead, developing, improving, optimizing. And Aston is still trying to understand the basics. Now here's where it becomes even more critical. Because the FIA is not just observing this as a performance issue. They're looking at the implications. Because when a system behaves unpredictably, and affects driver control, and creates physical strain, it crosses into a different category. Safety. And that changes everything. Because safety issues don't wait. They don't get delayed. They get addressed immediately. Which means, if the FIA determines that these vibrations pose a real risk, they can force changes, limitations, adjustments to how the power unit is used. And if that happens, Aston Martin doesn't just lose performance. They lose options. Because they're already running in a restricted window. Lower power, safer settings, less aggressive deployment. All just to keep the car together. Now imagine that window getting even smaller. That's when the situation becomes critical. Because at that point, you're not competing. You're surviving. And that's exactly where Aston Martin is heading right now. Not fighting for points. Not developing upgrades. Just trying to get through a race weekend without damage. And that's not sustainable. Not in Formula One. Not in a season that's just getting started. So now everything comes down to one thing. Finding the root cause. Understanding exactly where these vibrations are coming from. Is it the engine itself? A specific frequency inside the power unit? An interaction with the chassis? The way the battery is mounted? Or something even deeper, in the architecture of the system? Because until they answer that question, nothing changes. And the most worrying part is that even now, they don't have a clear answer. And until they do, this isn't just a bad phase. This is a downward spiral. And if it continues, what we're seeing now is only the beginning. And now, we reach the point where this stops being just a technical problem. Because what Aston Martin is facing right now is starting to look like a collapse. Not because they lack performance, but because everything around that performance is breaking down. At this stage, the team isn't asking how to go faster. They're asking how to make the car stable, how to make it predictable, how to make it survivable over a full race distance. Because right now, that's not guaranteed. And that changes the entire approach of a Formula One team. Because development stops. Upgrades become irrelevant. Performance gains don't matter if the car can't handle them. So instead of moving forward, Aston Martin is being forced to go backwards. Simpler setups, lower loads, reduced power, everything designed to reduce stress on the system. But every step in that direction costs performance. And that's why the results look so bad. Not because the car is inherently slow, but because it's being held back, restricted, limited by a problem that affects everything. Now here's where it becomes even more critical. Because while Aston Martin is stepping back, their rivals are doing the opposite. Pushing harder, developing faster, building momentum early in the season. And this is when gaps become dangerous. Because once you fall behind in Formula One, Catching up isn't just about speed. It's about time. And time is exactly what Aston doesn't have. Now add another layer. Honda. Because this isn't just an Aston Martin issue. This is a power unit issue. Which means the responsibility is shared. And that complicates everything. Because now you're not just fixing a car. You're coordinating between two organizations, two engineering teams, two development paths, trying to solve one problem under pressure. And if the root cause is deep inside the engine architecture, then the solution isn't simple. It's not a setup tweak. It's not a quick fix between races. It's redesign, testing, validation. And that takes time. A lot of time. Now imagine doing all of that while the season is already underway, while races keep coming, while results keep slipping. That's the situation Aston Martin is in. And that's why the FIA's involvement matters so much. Because at this point, this isn't just about fixing performance. It's about controlling risk. Because if the vibrations continue, if the stress on components continues, if the impact on drivers continues, then intervention becomes inevitable, not optional. Because safety always comes first. And that means the FIA could step in and force limitations. Restrictions on how the power unit is used. Restrictions on operating ranges. Restrictions that make the car safer, but even slower. And if that happens, the situation gets even worse. Because now Aston Martin isn't just limited by the problem. They're limited by regulation. And that's when a difficult season becomes almost impossible. But here's the most important part. Because everything we've talked about, all the symptoms, all the consequences, they all point back to one single question. What exactly is causing these vibrations? Because until that is answered, nothing changes. And right now, even with all the analysis, all the data, all the pressure, that answer is still not clear. And that's what makes this so dangerous. Because in Formula One, uncertainty is the worst possible position to be in. You can fix a known problem. You can improve a known weakness. But when you don't fully understand the issue, you can't control it. And right now, Aston Martin doesn't have control. And if they don't find it soon, this won't just be a difficult start to the season. It will be the moment everything started to fall apart.